Welcome to Confessions by Banana Ketchup. Haunted by a demon for 15 years, answering all your questions and giving advice. I've commented on a lot of posts about my experiences, and every time there is a few people messaging me wanting to talk about it or ask me stuff. Somehow they never end up responding again, but I thought I would make an official post about my experiences and share some of my knowledge that I've gathered over the years. It's gonna be a very long post, so I hope you can bear with me. I apologize for any typos or spelling errors. So, it all started when me and my brother and father moved into a house. It was a 3-story house with 2 apartments on each floor. The house was over 100 years old, but well renovated, and right across the street was my new school, and we were surrounded by a lovely park. All in all, an amazing place to grow up. I was 5, maybe 6 years old at the time. Back then, I noticed a lot of shadows in the corners of my eyes. This went on for 10 years without me realizing that it is in fact not a normal eye thing. When I was young, I was extremely afraid of the dark, and for some reason, I always thought Batman was gonna stand there when I opened my eyes and kill me. Thinking back, Batman was a very tall black figure, which is gonna be important later on. I've always been extremely sensitive to the energies around me and the paranormal, so my guess is that I already sensed his presence, but didn't know what it was yet. I was also dealing with depression and insomnia ever since I was very young due to a bad family stuff, but that is also relevant. When I got older, about 12, my mental issues started to worsen drastically, and I started to cut myself and stuff like that. My insomnia was pretty bad, and after I was finished with high school at 15, my sleep cycle was docked beyond repair, so I was usually awake at night and slept during the day, or often not at all. I was constantly sleep deprived. Weird stuff started to happen. Objects would disappear and reappear after months. Stuff would randomly fall off shelves and harmless stuff like that, but I noticed it and it was odd. I started hearing voices yelling or whispering my name. It was the voices of my dad or brother most of the time, only to realize they weren't home or asleep. It got worse pretty fast. It was a long time ago and I can't remember in what order things happened, but there were multiple auditory things going on. Gurgling like someone was being choked to death from the middle of our living room. Strange music awakening me at night, coming from the corner of my room to then get more silent and disappear again. Knocking on the walls, always 3 times. Horrible demonic scratches, footsteps, mainly coming from the attic, which was right above our apartment. Sometimes it sounded like someone was throwing around whole closets up there. Really loud rumbling in the middle of the night. By that time, I already knew my house was haunted, but I didn't know what it was yet. So me and my neighbor and friend Natasha, which was my age and we grew up together, she also had an older brother that was my brother's age, called Peter, started to investigate. We realized that she and her brother have been bothered by the entity before I have, and they had a guest room that was mainly where it stayed at first. Ever since I lived there, I could not enter the room because the presence was so overwhelmingly evil, almost like the air was crushing you. That same feeling I got after it started and had it 24/7 for about a year. That feeling as if someone is standing right behind you holding a knife at your back. Very, very uneasy. I'm sure some of you know the feeling. So I tried to communicate with it and gave it lots of attention thinking it was a ghost, which was my biggest mistake. Things got a lot worse very quickly, and it had completely attached to me because I was the perfect victim and a buffet of negative emotions, which I later learned was their main energy source to make them stronger. So that one night, I looked at the shadow in the corner of my eyes and saw a black silhouette of a cat jump off my bed and disappear mid-air, or rather evaporating like smoke. I jumped around because I sensed someone standing behind me, and there it was in full form. It was what many people call shadow people or hat man. I'm sure there are other terms, but I later learned that these shadowy figures are demons, and they can appear in various forms, often with glowing eyes or a hat. Mine was blank, no face, no hands or feet, not even a real head, but it was about 2 meters tall and filled up the room with dark, smoky shadow and stared into my soul with its non-existent eyes for a moment. I froze in shock, but as fast as it appeared before me, it disappeared again. After that, things got really bad because I started to really research and knew what I was dealing with. I got obsessed. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. This was all I cared about. He started to play mind games after that point, which was probably the peak of his haunting. Due to my depression and suicidal tendencies, I welcomed darkness and wasn't scared of many things. After that night, I almost started to cry when the lights were out or only half on. He knew that and used it against me, shattering a light bulb in our apartment every 2 days or so. We were pretty poor, so we wouldn't always get the new one immediately, and since I was awake at night, I had to deal with it. He was active during the day too, but when the clock hit 2 to 4 a.m., it was the worst. That's when they are most active. One time, I walked into the kitchen, and before I could turn on the lights, I stood on something weird. Turned on the lights to find the floor crawling with maggots. Every inch was covered in them. I was shocked, grossed out, and panicked and tried to shovel them up and put them in the trash, basically crying through the whole thing. Somehow they were light flighty and disappeared into the walls after a few minutes. There weren't any cracks, which added to my confusion. One time I talked to it all day, just peeking into the air, but I felt its presence and hoped it would let me sleep late at night. I remember saying something like, "I gave you attention all day now, and would appreciate it if you let me sleep now." The energy in the room suddenly got really aggressive, and I felt something choking me for a few minutes. That was the one and only physical attack I experienced. They generally don't want to physically harm us, because it would be counterproductive. They will, however, do it if it helps their grand plan to break us. Basically, I was an exhausted wreck, because I spent my nights literally fighting off a demon. I knew I needed help, and registered in a paranormal forum. There was a guy who ended up helping me twice. He was magically talented and able to astral project and stuff like that. Back then, he strongly weakened the demon, and it actually stopped for a few years. Every now and then, little things would happen, but nothing that made me worried. He still followed me everywhere and had a strong negative impact on my emotions and overall well-being, so much that he drove me to try and commit suicide at the age 16. There were other reasons that contributed to it, but I strongly believe that he was to blame for the most part. This whole experience was extremely traumatizing, like living in a horror movie. Besides, my friends that lived in the house, no one believed me. My dad didn't take me serious, and my brother knew stuff was going on, but he was scared, so he decided to ignore it and leave me alone with it. There were so many more things that happened, but I can't possibly write them all down here. This post is already long enough. I saw some apparitions over the years or heard weird stuff, but overall it left me alone. Not sure if he was waiting for the right time again or if he was too weak. After my suicide attempt, I went to a clinic and met my future best friend. We started to communicate with the demon with Ouija board, but there wasn't much useful stuff he said. I learned that they just tell you what you want to hear and that you can basically not believe a single word they say. I developed some kind of ducked up mental connection with him. Well, about 2 years ago, he became active again. I went to bed at night and my boyfriend was already laying there, put out all the lights and closed my eyes. I opened them again and noticed there was light in the living room. As I looked, the light was turned off again. He waited until I looked. These light plays was what he used to do years ago too, and while this might seem harmless, I knew this was it. It starts again. I was so scared that my body shaking violently for hours, and my boyfriend had to comfort me. I contacted my friend that helped me years ago and spent a couple of months developing a plan to trap the demon in an object. My friend ended up going behind my back and do something far more risky, but it worked, and the demon is gone for good. At least I think he is, because the connection is severed, and I don't feel him anymore, but I will know in a few years. Since there are so many people dealing with demons, I will add 3 major signs that what you're dealing with is a demon. Number 1. Shadows in the corner of your eyes or black apparitions. This also includes the famous sleep paralysis figures. Number 2. Knocking 3 times. Number 3. Extreme tense energy in the room, like the air is gonna crush you. Strong feeling of being watched. Other signs that might occur more frequent than usual. Number 1. Very negative thoughts. Number 2. Nightmares. Number 3. Sleep paralysis. If you deal with mental illness like depression or similar, it is more likely that you are being haunted by a demon or to attract one and get an attachment like I did. If you experience any of the things I mentioned, do not engage in it. Just ignore it or pretend you don't notice it. Try not to be scared. If that doesn't work, let it know that this is your space and that light beings are not allowed to come near you and stuff like that, basically telling it that it is not allowed near you and that it has no power over you. But stay respectful. Best is to not give it any sort of attention whatsoever, because if you're in, you're in. There is no way out unless you got a person like I did, which is very unlikely, and I was very lucky that he contacted and helped me. I might also mention that I did get tested for schizophrenia or psychosis and have none of that, and the psychiatrists were kind of speechless about what I told them. I'm happy to answer all your questions if you have any, and help out other people that are dealing with stuff like this. I spent years on learning about demonology and know exactly how they behave and what their goal is. Thanks for reading. TLDR was haunted by a demon and went through hell because of it, sharing my knowledge. Thank you, Raised by Spirits, the author. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you already haven't, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any new episodes. See you again in my next video, and until then, please, be safe.